is patient number 9?
Me, I suppose. The last 4 years have been sheer hell for me. I've been in such a bad health-wise.
Now our ABC News exclusive with Sharon and Ozzy Osbourne, their first TV interview since Ozzy's recovery from a major operation. Chris Conley sat down with them and he joins us now.
I mean, survival is my legacy. Never give up. If you've got a passion for something, you've got to find a way around to carry on the passion.
He lit stages on fire, terrified parents, and rewrote the rules of rock. But no one, not even the devil himself, could have predicted how Ozzy Osbourne's story would end. Because in the final years of his life, the man who once called himself immortal quietly began to fall apart. Not with a bang, but with silence.
Metal star Ozzy Osbourne has died after years battling ill health, his death coming just weeks after a farewell concert in the UK with his Black Sabbath bandmates.
Gone were the chaotic screams of the crowd, the makeup, the mayhem. In its place, hushed hospital rooms, whispered prayers from family, and the weight of a legacy built on madness, now fragile and fading. Behind closed doors, Ozzy was no longer the bat-biting madman. He was a husband, a father, a man haunted by the choices that had shaped him and the demons that never truly left. There were days he couldn't speak, days he couldn't walk, and days where the only sound in his home was the soft hum of machines keeping time. He had lived loudly for decades, but his final chapter was a whisper, raw, reflective, and painfully human. And those closest to him knew. The world had seen the performance, the persona, but it had never seen the man. Until now. Ozzy's fall didn't happen overnight. In fact, to many of his fans, it didn't seem to happen at all. That's the thing about icons. They're expected to keep going, to keep performing, no matter how broken they become. But the signs were there, if you looked closely enough. The missed steps on stage, the delayed interviews, the sudden cancellations, and then the silence. It began with the spine, a slow, creeping deterioration that even decades of painkillers couldn't mask anymore. Surgeries piled up, so did the complications. Ozzy, who once roared into microphones with unfiltered chaos, was now being wheeled into operating rooms, frail and afraid. One surgery left him temporarily unable to walk. Another affected his ability to hold his balance. And while the tabloids offered up jokes and clickbait, inside the Osbourne home, it was no laughing matter. Sharon Osbourne, always the fighter, stood beside him. But even she couldn't shield him from the inevitable. He's in constant pain, she admitted in one rare emotional interview. And there are days when he just wants it to stop. What made it worse was that Ozzy could still remember everything. Every riff, every lyric, every high, and every devastating low. His mind remained a vault of memories, but his body had betrayed him.
He was that rare star who was known as both the Prince of Darkness,
Mama, I'm coming home,
and the patriarch of a lovable but eccentric family.
For a man who had built his identity on defiance, of rules, of norms, of death itself, that kind of betrayal was unbearable. And yet, he kept going. He recorded. He appeared. He smiled when he could. Because somewhere deep down, Ozzy still believed in the magic of performance, even if the spotlight now burned more than it healed. There was a day, sometime in 2022, when he tried to rehearse a song, one of his classics. Sharon walked into the room and saw him holding the mic, eyes closed, trying to summon the power that used to come so easily. His hand trembled, his voice cracked, but he kept going, verse after verse. When he finished, there was no applause, no roaring crowd, just a silence that settled into the corners of the room like dust. He sat down slowly, looked at his wife, and said, "That might have been the last time." Sharon didn't speak. She didn't need to. They both knew what he meant. and neither of them wanted to say it aloud. Because saying it meant admitting it, that the stage, the place where he had become immortal, was no longer his sanctuary. It was his past. And all that remained was the man beneath the makeup, confronting the quiet for the first time in decades. But in that silence, something else began to emerge, something even more powerful than the chaos he once commanded.
Ozzy first rose to fame in the 1970s as the lead singer of Black Sabbath, giving the heavy metal genre a major boost.
Reflection. In recent months, Ozzy became more candid, with Sharon, with friends, even with fans. He spoke about his regrets, not just the drugs or the excess, but the time he lost, the moments with his children he missed, the birthdays blurred by tours, the years eaten by addiction. "I was always running," he said, during a private interview filmed but never aired. "Running from the pain, from the fear, from who I was without all the noise." This was the side of Ozzy that few had seen. Vulnerable, tired, honest. He admitted he didn't expect to live past 40, that everything after was a strange kind of borrowed time, and that the further he got from the stage, the more he realized how little he'd actually faced of his own life. "I was everyone's chaos," he said, "but I never knew how to just be someone's peace." And as he spoke more openly, Sharon began to record pieces of those conversations, not for the world, but for their children. Snippets of truth, tucked away for a time when they'd want to understand the man behind the myth. It wasn't just his music he wanted to pass down, it was his honesty, his brokenness, his desire to make sense of a life that had been lived louder than most. And if you've made it this far into Ozzy's journey, thank you. These are the stories that rarely make it into headlines. If you want more unseen, unfiltered truths from the lives of legends, make sure to subscribe. Your curiosity helps keep these voices alive. Now let's talk about what Ozzy feared the most in those final days, and the one secret he carried with him that even Sharon didn't expect. It wasn't death. That surprised everyone. Ozzy had made peace with dying years ago. After overdoses, near-death experiences, and the hard living that defined the first half of his life, death no longer scared him. What haunted him was irrelevance, not being forgotten by fans, but being forgotten by the people he loved. "What if the kids don't remember the real me?" he once asked Sharon late one night. "Not the shows, not the screaming, but me, Dad."
I'm just a dreamer.
People take me or leave me. I mean, I'm just Ozzy Osbourne, and I always will be Ozzy Osbourne.
It was his most vulnerable moment. He worried that his public persona had overshadowed everything else, that his grandchildren would know the legend, but not the man, that the chaos he created had buried the quiet truths of who he really was. That's why he spent his final years archiving everything. Letters, voice notes, songs that had never been released. Not for fans, for family. And in the center of it all was one confession, a recording Sharon found after his passing, a message to his children. In it, his voice cracked, but was steady. "I did a lot of damage," he said, "but I never stopped loving you, not once, even when I was lost in it all. You were the reason I wanted to come back." It was Ozzy, stripped of myth, stripped of madness. Just a father, just a man, saying goodbye the only way he knew how, through a voice that had once changed the world. But Ozzy's story doesn't end with regret. In the final year of his life, there was also healing. Small, unexpected moments that offered redemption, if not for the past, then for the present. He began inviting his children over more often, not for events, not for photos, just for time. They'd sit in the garden behind the house in Buckinghamshire. No press, no cameras, just tea, old stories, and sometimes silence. One of his daughters later said, "It was the first time I saw him really listen." He didn't try to be Ozzy, he just tried to be Dad. Jack, his son, brought over his kids more regularly. The grandkids didn't care about platinum albums or world tours. They cared that their grandfather would watch cartoons with them or laugh at their terrible jokes. And Ozzy, broken body and all, made the effort. Sometimes he'd struggle just to walk down the hallway to the living room. But he did it, because those quiet hours with family gave him something fame never had: peace. In one especially tender moment, his youngest granddaughter crawled onto his lap and asked, "Are you the real Prince of Darkness?" Ozzy chuckled, rasped out a laugh, and said, "No, love, I'm just your silly old granddad." That sentence, simple, almost childish, was the closest he ever came to rewriting his legacy.
Think about legacy, I just plod along, you know.
Not a god, not a demon, just a man who had finally found something sacred in the ordinary. That's what made those final months feel different. He stopped chasing headlines. He turned down projects. He even ignored calls from producers wanting one last reunion tour. He knew what mattered now, and it wasn't stadiums. It was this: family, forgiveness, and a quiet kind of joy. But even in those moments of joy, there was something bittersweet lingering in the background: the knowledge that Ozzy's time was running out. Sharon saw it before anyone else: the way he would look out the window a little longer, the sighs that came more frequently, the way he'd stare at family photos like he was memorizing them for the last time. There were nights he couldn't sleep, not from pain, but from thoughts. Thoughts of what he would leave behind, and what would be left unsaid. So he began writing, not songs, not lyrics, letters. Handwritten, ink-stained, often messy letters to the people he loved most. Each child received one, each grandchild. Even former bandmates, some of whom he hadn't spoken to in decades, got a note. He apologized where he needed to. He expressed love where he never had. And he shared memories that only he had carried all these years. One letter to Tony Iommi, his longtime Black Sabbath bandmate, reportedly ended with the line, "No matter how dark the sound got, we were the light for each other, even when we didn't know it." It was closure, not loud, not showy, just real. And when he finished, he sealed each letter in a separate envelope, placed them in a drawer beside his bed, and told Sharon, "When I'm gone, make sure they read these." But he wasn't done yet. There was one last conversation he wanted to have.
People like that, you know, make concerts happen. And I don't know what to say, man. I've been laid up for like fucking 6 years.
One he had been avoiding for decades. With himself. So he asked for time alone. For an entire afternoon, Sharon left him in his study. The curtains were drawn, the lights dim. Just Ozzy, a tape recorder, and a journal. No makeup, no masks. He pressed record. And what followed, according to those who later heard it, was the most vulnerable piece of truth he ever produced. "I don't know if I was ever meant to live this long," he began, "but I did. And I've seen things, done things, survived things no one should. And yet, the scariest part of all this was not dying. It was being forgotten for the wrong things." He spoke about fame, about addiction, about betrayal, of others, and of himself. He spoke about Sharon, calling her the only person who never gave up on the man behind the madness. He cried, he laughed, he went silent. And when the tape clicked off, he sat there, alone, with nothing left to say. When the news of Ozzy's passing broke, the world paused. Social media flooded with tributes, old concert footage, and heartfelt messages from fans who had followed his every move for decades.
The Black Sabbath lead singer Ozzy Osbourne has died at the age of 76. His family have announced this evening. I'm going to read and show you the statement one more time from his family.
Musicians posted black and white photos. Celebrities recalled wild encounters. And even critics, those who once mocked him, admitted there would never be another Ozzy. But in the Osbourne household, the reaction was quieter. Jack Osbourne turned off his phone. Kelly sat with her son, explaining why Grandpa wouldn't be around anymore. And Sharon, for the first time in her public life, canceled every appearance and didn't offer a single statement. She grieved the way only someone who has shared every war and every wound with another soul can. Ozzy's funeral wasn't a media circus. It was small, private, just family, a few close friends, and a playlist he had chosen himself, filled with songs that had nothing to do with metal, but everything to do with emotion. Elton John, Sinatra, even some old Beatles tracks, one attendee revealed. You'd expect Sabbath, right? But he didn't want that. He said, "They already know that part of me. Let them hear the rest." There were no golden caskets, no pyrotechnics, just ashes, laughter, and tears. And one sentence, whispered by Sharon as she laid her hand on his urn, "You were always more than they knew." Weeks after his death, something strange began to happen. Instead of fading, Ozzy's presence seemed to grow. Not in the way tabloids exploit celebrity deaths, but in quiet, powerful ways. A new wave of fans, teenagers, even children, began discovering his music for the first time. TikTok was filled with kids lip-syncing Crazy Train. Spotify streams doubled. Documentaries about his life began trending, and the letters he had written.
Oh, well, you know, it's run its course, really. I mean, I spend most of my time in America now, and Tony, it just felt right, you know.
Each one was shared, not with the world, but with the people who needed them most. Jack read his aloud on a podcast episode, pausing often, holding back tears. Kelly turned hers into a song. And Sharon? She's working on a memoir, not about her career, but about the man she loved for more than 40 years. In death, Ozzy became something he never was in life, understood. Because behind the madness was always meaning. Behind the screams, sorrow. Behind the spectacle, soul. His story is a reminder that legends are not defined by the chaos they create, but by the truth they leave behind. And Ozzy Osbourne's truth, raw, broken, beautiful, will echo louder than any amp ever could. In the final weeks before his passing, Ozzy made a surprising choice. He disconnected. No interviews, no visitors, no studio calls. He asked Sharon to cancel everything. He wanted to be home, not as Ozzy Osbourne, rock god, but as John Michael Osbourne, the boy from Birmingham who once dreamed of escaping the factories and the gray skies. He spent his mornings looking out over the garden, drinking tea, listening to birds, sometimes humming melodies that had no words, no structure, just feeling. There were no regrets left to air, no performances left to give, only presence. He was the calmest I've ever seen him, Sharon told a close friend.
Ozzy announced he would stop touring for good.
Now I've got grandchildren. I want to spend some time with them.
There was this softness about him, like he had finally forgiven himself. Forgiveness, that's what it came down to in the end. Not from the world, but from himself. For the drugs, the fights, the broken promises. For not always being the father he should have been. For not knowing how to be whole without the noise. And in that silence, he found something more powerful than fame. He found peace. While fans around the world celebrated Ozzy's rebellious image, the wild man of rock, the unfiltered, uncensored icon, few ever truly understood the cost of carrying that persona for so long. It wasn't just an act, it became a prison. For decades, Ozzy felt he had to live up to the myth. He couldn't show fear, couldn't admit weakness, couldn't walk away. Even in moments where his body screamed for rest, he'd sign another contract, board another plane, perform another show. Because deep down, he feared that slowing down meant disappearing, that if he didn't keep moving, the world would forget him. The exhaustion ran deeper than the physical. It was spiritual. He had long conversations with Sharon in the middle of the night, not about music or money, but about meaning. "What was it all for?" he once asked her, voice barely audible over the ticking of a clock in their room. "Did I do anything good, or was I just loud?" Sharon held his hand and simply said, "You gave people a place to feel free." That's not nothing. That stayed with him. In those final months, he began writing poems, not for the public, for himself. Some were just a few lines, others filled pages.
I don't know what a typical American family is because it's not abnormal to me the way I live, because I live that way.
They weren't polished, they weren't even meant to be seen, but they were real. One poem, discovered after his death, read, "I shouted so loud, I forgot how to whisper, but in the end, it's the quiet that holds me." Ozzy was never just metal. He was never just madness. He was a man searching for something soft in a world that had always demanded he be hard. Just weeks before he passed, Ozzy made one final gesture that left his family speechless. He gathered everyone, Sharon, the children, the grandkids, and invited them to sit with him for an evening. No phones, no cameras, just them. He had arranged a small home screening of an unreleased video he had recorded a year earlier. A kind of living will, not about assets or instructions, but about love. On screen, Ozzy sat in a chair, eyes locked with the camera. He didn't read from a script. He just spoke. To Sharon, he said, "You kept me alive. You kept me sane. And I hope in the end, I gave you something worth holding on to." To his children, "I know I scared you sometimes. I know I was a storm, but I never stopped loving you. You were always the calm I was looking for." And to his grandkids, "Don't let my name be the thing you carry. Let my heart be." By the time the video ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. And Ozzy? He just smiled, leaned back in his chair and said, "Now you know everything." It was his final performance. And this time, the audience was family. After the letters were read, the footage seen, and the tears shed, something remarkable happened. The house didn't feel empty. It felt full, not of noise, but of meaning. Ozzy's family, for the first time in years, didn't see the shadow of a fading icon. They saw the whole man, laid bare, without spotlight or stage makeup. A man who had battled more demons than most, and somehow, despite it all, had managed to die with love in his heart.
At the time that we got married, people would look at Ozzy and they'd look at me and they'd think, "Oh, she's so straight, she's so like housewifey."
Even as the world tried to turn his death into a headline, those closest to him resisted. There would be no tribute concert, no endless interviews, no repackaging of his pain for profit. Because Ozzy had already given everything he had. What he left behind wasn't a brand, it was a truth. A reminder that even the loudest legends are human, that even the wildest lives come to a whisper, that even the so-called Prince of Darkness longed for the same things we all do: peace, forgiveness, and to be remembered. Not for the chaos he created, but for the quiet he finally embraced. There's an old recording Sharon now keeps in her private collection. A voicemail Ozzy once left her when he was on tour in the early 2000s. It's short, just a few seconds. His voice is tired, maybe even hoarse from performing, but it's gentle. He says, "I miss you, love. I'm in a room full of people, and all I want is to be home." That, more than any platinum record or Hall of Fame induction, is his legacy. Not the scream, not the show, but the man who, after a lifetime of being followed by crowds, finally just wanted to be held. Ozzy Osbourne didn't go out the way he came in. There was no explosion, no scandal, no shock. Just silence. Gentle, aching, honest silence. But in that stillness, his voice still echoes. Through every fan who found solace in his chaos. Through every child he finally embraced in his final years. Through every letter, every whispered apology, every act of courage that said, "I am more than my mask." And in many ways, that's the truest form of rebellion. To face your demons, not with fists, not with fire, but with forgiveness. So maybe Ozzy was never the Prince of Darkness after all. Maybe he was just a man, brave enough to bring his pain into the light. And maybe that's what we'll remember most. Because when the amps go silent and the lights go down, what remains isn't the noise, it's the truth. And Ozzy Osbourne's truth? It shines. Now it's your turn. What do you remember most about Ozzy? Was it the chaos, the concerts, or the man behind the madness? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more stories that go beyond the fame, stories that show the heart behind the headline, make sure to subscribe, because legends don't die. They just tell better stories when the world finally stops to listen.